Wife whispered, "Don't touch me tonight." I whispered, "Goodbye," the next morning. Reddit-cheating Evan woke to the quiet hum of the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds in thin golden stripes, painting Mara's face in soft light. She was lying beside him, still, but something felt off. For weeks, maybe months, he had noticed little changes, small things he had ignored. But today, it felt bigger. He had a sense that something invisible had shifted in their lives, something he couldn't quite reach yet. He reached out instinctively to brush her hair back, but she flinched slightly and whispered, "Don't touch me tonight." Evan froze. Her words weren't angry. They weren't loud or confrontational, but the weight of them made his chest tighten. "Tonight," she said, almost rehearsed. The whisper carried a distance he had never heard before. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a wall. He didn't answer. He didn't ask why. He simply let her go, his hand falling to the sheet. For a moment he stared at her face, hoping for a sign that it was just a passing mood, a tired day, stress from work, maybe even some misunderstanding. But Mara's breathing was calm, peaceful, unbothered. Evan lay back, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the last few months, the small cracks he had brushed away. He remembered the nights she stayed late at work, her phone buzzing in the other room, the hurried messages she deleted as soon as he walked in. He remembered the sudden, unexplained trips to visit friends he barely knew, and he remembered the evenings when she looked right through him, as if he was a stranger sharing her space. He had loved her deeply, maybe blindly. But now, that love carried a sharp edge, an edge of suspicion he could no longer ignore. The night had been quiet, but now the silence screamed. He wanted to wake her, ask questions, demand explanations, but another part of him recoiled. Confrontation could push her further away. And deep down he feared the answers. He feared that the truth might shatter everything he had built, everything he had believed about their life together. So he did the only thing he could. He waited. By the time Mara left for work, Evan had made a small, secret plan. Not revenge, not confrontation, not dramatic gestures, just observation. Quiet, careful, patient observation. He would find out the truth without burning bridges, or maybe he would burn the bridge when it was strong enough to fall. He sat at the breakfast table, pretending to scroll through emails while his mind raced. How long had she been hiding this? Was it recent? Months? Weeks? His stomach twisted as he imagined the possibilities. He tried to convince himself that he might be wrong, that maybe her coldness was just stress, a fleeting moment, something temporary. But the voice in his head kept repeating those two words she had whispered the night before. "Don't touch me." Evan decided he needed clarity. Not confrontation, not blame, just facts. He started noticing everything, small things that had seemed insignificant before. The way her eyes darted when she received certain notifications, the way her laughter changed when she spoke to some friends, the careful way she kept her phone out of reach. It was subtle, almost invisible, but to Evan it screamed of secrets. Later that day, when Mara left for work, Evan lingered near the living room. He tried not to seem intrusive, but he couldn't stop the pull of curiosity. He picked up her tablet, careful not to seem obvious. His hands trembled slightly, not with anger, not with hatred, but with a strange mix of fear and anticipation. And there it was. A message preview popped up, a familiar nickname, a shared joke, a promise he didn't recognize. Evan felt a cold wave sweep over him. He closed the tablet slowly, as if sealing away the evidence from himself, though part of him knew the truth. It was happening. She was having an affair. But he didn't yell. He didn't storm into her office. He didn't confront her. He sat down quietly, letting the silence grow around him. He didn't need to react immediately. Right now, observation was enough. He needed to see the full picture before making any decisions. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Evan walked through his routine, but his mind was elsewhere. Every laugh from Mara over the phone, every hurried goodbye before meetings, every smile that didn't reach her eyes, they were all part of a puzzle he had only just begun to understand. He remembered the small things he had ignored over the years, the subtle avoidance of eye contact, the secretive messages, the occasional cold shoulder. He had always thought he was imagining it, that perhaps he was being paranoid, insecure, but now he realized those were warnings he had dismissed, and he couldn't unsee them anymore. When evening came, Mara returned home as if nothing had happened. She smiled at him, the practiced, casual smile of someone who knows secrets no one else knows. Evan greeted her warmly, but inside, a quiet storm was brewing. He knew he couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't go on like nothing was wrong. But he also knew that confrontation wasn't the answer. Not yet. Patience, observation, and strategy would serve him better than anger. As they sat down to dinner, Evan noticed the smallest detail. Her hands were slightly tense, her laughter a touch too bright, her eyes avoiding his. She was hiding something, and he was done ignoring it. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Mara curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Evan watched her quietly, not touching, not speaking, just observing. He noticed the way her thumbs flew across the screen, the way her face lit up for no reason he could see. He felt a strange combination of sadness and resolve. Sadness for the love he thought they had, resolve because he now understood what he had to do. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Evan lay beside Mara again. He felt the familiar warmth of her presence, but it was shadowed by the knowledge he now carried. He stared at the ceiling, replaying her whisper, "Don't touch me tonight." Those words were no longer just a refusal. They were a warning, a signal that their life together was not what it seemed. He didn't reach out to her. He didn't speak. He simply lay there, letting the silence stretch between them. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt clarity. And clarity was painful. Before sleep took him, Evan made a quiet decision. He wouldn't act in anger. He wouldn't yell or accuse. He would watch. He would gather the truth. And when the moment was right, he would act with precision, with calm, and with dignity. That night, Evan didn't just lie beside Mara. He lay awake beside a truth he could no longer ignore. And in that quiet, he realized something powerful. Sometimes the most effective revenge doesn't start with a fight. It starts with knowledge, and he intended to know everything. The next morning, Evan woke to the soft sound of birds outside the window. Mara had already left for work, leaving the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He lay in bed for a few minutes, thinking about last night. Her whisper still echoed in his mind, "Don't touch me tonight." He realized he would never forget those words. They were not just a rejection. They were a warning, a sign that things between them had shifted permanently. Evan didn't call her, didn't leave a note, didn't demand an explanation. He had learned one thing the hard way. Confrontation too soon would only push her further away. If he wanted clarity, he had to act carefully. Patience, he reminded himself, was the most powerful tool he had. He started the day with his usual routine, coffee, news, and checking emails, but his mind was elsewhere. Every small detail of their life together began to replay like a slow movie. He noticed the way Mara's voice had changed over the past few months, the subtle distance in her laughter, the little habits she no longer shared with him. Things that once felt natural now seemed like clues, and suddenly everything he had dismissed before made sense. By mid-morning, Evan had made a decision. He would observe, quietly and without judgment. He didn't need proof for anger. He didn't need confrontation for closure. He only needed facts. And if the facts confirmed what he feared, he would act in a way that was calm, dignified, and final. He began tracking her habits more carefully. He noticed the patterns he had once ignored, the late meetings she always had, the sudden text messages she would hide the moment he entered the room, the way she sometimes smiled at her phone with a look he had never seen before. Each detail built a picture, and the picture unsettled him. Evan realized that this wasn't just about a small mistake or a moment of weakness. This was deeper. Mara wasn't just hiding something physical. There was an emotional connection elsewhere. And that, to him, felt like a betrayal he couldn't ignore. Even as he pieced the story together in his mind, Evan refused to let anger guide him. He didn't shout. He didn't demand answers. He simply watched, quietly, letting the truth reveal itself slowly. He would not react until he had the full story. And when that moment came, he would move with careful precision. The day passed slowly. Evan continued his work at home, his hands busy but his mind always returning to Mara. He remembered the nights she had stayed up working late, and the mornings she seemed unusually cheerful. He remembered the way she used to talk about her friends he had never met. Each memory added another layer of suspicion. And yet, he remained calm. He had learned that calmness gave clarity, anger gave only confusion. In the afternoon, Evan found a quiet moment to check her tablet again. He didn't want to, but he needed confirmation. He had resisted the urge yesterday, but the temptation today was too strong. With careful fingers, he unlocked it. There it was, a series of messages, exchanged in secrecy. Familiar jokes, shared plans, laughter that didn't belong to him. The messages confirmed his fears. She had an emotional connection with someone else. Evan closed the tablet slowly, taking a deep breath. He didn't feel rage. He didn't feel betrayal in the way he expected. He felt clarity. Clarity brought a strange peace. It also brought resolve. He knew what he had to do. He would not confront her yet. He would not beg or cry. He would watch, document, and wait. And when the time came, he would leave, but on his terms, with dignity intact. Evan spent the evening quietly. When Mara returned, she seemed cheerful, as if nothing had changed. She greeted him with a smile that now seemed forced, practiced. Evan returned the smile politely, but his mind was elsewhere. He watched her carefully, noticing every small gesture, every subtle expression. She laughed at things that weren't funny. She seemed distracted. And every smile she gave him felt like a mask hiding something deeper. Dinner was awkwardly normal. Evan asked polite questions about her day, listened without interrupting, but internally he cataloged everything. He noticed how she avoided eye contact when talking about her work. He noticed how she seemed to check her phone repeatedly, though she had no notifications. He noticed the small tremor in her hand as she sipped her tea. Evan realized that the power had shifted. Before, he had lived in ignorance, trusting Mara completely. Now he understood. He had the clarity she could not take from him. And with that clarity came strength. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Mara picked up a book, pretending to read. Evan watched her quietly. He didn't speak. He didn't judge. He simply observed. He saw the smallest signs, her finger tapping on the book nervously, the slight frown that appeared when she thought he wasn't looking, the way she shifted in her seat. Each movement confirmed what he already knew. Evan realized that confrontation was no longer necessary. There was no need for shouting, no need for accusation. Silence, he understood, could be louder than words. By not reacting, by remaining calm and composed, he was already reclaiming control over his life. The truth was his, and her secrets no longer had power over him. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Mara tried to be affectionate. She leaned closer, touched his shoulder lightly, and whispered, "I missed you today." Evan felt a pang, not of love, but of recognition. She was trying to mask her guilt, to hide the truth behind words that didn't carry meaning. He didn't respond the way she expected. He smiled politely, said nothing more, and turned to face the ceiling. Her whisper the night before came back to him. "Don't touch me tonight." And now, he knew that her distance had a reason. The words were no longer just a rejection. They were part of a pattern, part of the truth she had been hiding. And for the first time, Evan realized that he didn't need to fix it. He didn't need to fight. He only needed to observe, to wait, and to plan. Sleep came slowly. Evan lay awake, thinking, remembering, and planning. He realized that revenge didn't need to be dramatic or angry. It didn't need to humiliate or punish. Sometimes the most powerful revenge was quiet, calculated, and dignified. It was knowing the truth, controlling your own actions, and refusing to let betrayal define you. As he drifted off to sleep, Evan made a silent promise to himself. He would not confront Mara in anger. He would not beg for explanations. He would wait, gather evidence, and act when the time was right. And when that moment came, he would leave, not with a scream or a fight, but with quiet strength, calm dignity, and a finality she could not ignore. And so, the house remained quiet that night, but the tension between them was palpable. Mara slept, unaware that Evan was awake, fully aware of her secrets. And Evan lay beside her, calm, composed, and ready. For the first time in months, he understood the power of patience. And he knew that his moment of reckoning would come, but on his own terms. The whisper of the night before had set the stage, and Evan was ready to play his part perfectly. Days passed like slow-moving shadows in Evan's house. Every morning, Mara would leave for work with the same practiced smile, the same routine, as if nothing had changed. And every morning, Evan would watch her go, silent, calm, and thoughtful. Nothing in him shouted, nothing in him pleaded. He had learned the quiet power of observation, and he understood now that action spoke louder than words. He had spent the last week carefully collecting small details, writing notes in his mind, remembering the dates, the times, the tiny slips Mara had made. It wasn't just her late nights at work or hidden messages. It was the laughter she shared that never included him, the casual mentions of someone whose name he didn't know, the subtle changes in her tone whenever she spoke to certain friends. Every small sign was a piece of the puzzle, and now he could see the full picture. Evan didn't feel angry, not in the way he thought he would. Anger, he realized, would make him lose control. He didn't want to lose control. He wanted power. He wanted clarity. And he wanted freedom. That evening, Mara tried to engage him in conversation, as she always did. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone light, her eyes scanning his face for signs of worry or suspicion. Evan smiled politely. "It was good. Busy, but good," he said, deliberately vague. She frowned slightly, sensing a shift she didn't understand. He had changed. She could feel it, but she couldn't name it. Dinner was quiet. Mara tried to talk about work, about friends, about weekend plans, but Evan responded minimally, politely, without emotion. His calm, composed demeanor unnerved her. She had expected confrontation, tears, anger, but none of that came. Instead, there was only quiet, and silence, as Evan had discovered, could be louder than words. After dinner, Evan excused himself. He needed to prepare. Not for a fight, not for a confrontation, but for closure. He pulled out a notebook he had kept hidden for days. Inside, he had written everything he had observed: the late-night messages, the secret conversations, the emotional distance, the laughter and shared plans that didn't include him. Each page was a reminder of the truth. Each page was proof. Evan sat quietly, thinking about the letter he would write. He didn't want it to be angry or bitter. He didn't want it to shame her or humiliate her. That was not his style. Instead, he wanted it to be clear, precise, and final. It would say exactly what needed to be said. He knew the truth. He had chosen dignity, and he was leaving. As he wrote, he felt a strange sense of peace. For months, maybe years, he had felt tension, suspicion, and doubt. Now, everything was out in the open. The truth was clear, and his path forward was clear. The hardest part, accepting the betrayal, had already passed. What remained was action. And action, he reminded himself, should always be calm, decisive, and final. By the time Mara returned from her evening walk, Evan had finished the letter. He folded it carefully and placed it on the kitchen table where she would find it. Then he went about his routine as if nothing had happened. When Mara entered, she sensed something, but she could not pinpoint it. Evan smiled politely, asked her about her walk, and listened quietly to her words without interruption. Later, when it was time for bed, Mara leaned closer, as she sometimes did, and whispered, "Are you upset with me?" Evan turned his head toward her, his eyes calm and steady. He shook his head softly. "No," he said, voice even. "I just need some space to think." She nodded, slightly confused, and curled up beside him. Evan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how he would leave. It would not be dramatic. It would not be loud. He would leave with dignity, quietly and final, just as he had promised himself. That night, he didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He simply lay there, alert and calm, letting her sleep. And when the first rays of sunlight spilled into the bedroom the next morning, Evan made his move. Mara was still asleep when he quietly got out of bed. He dressed slowly, deliberately, making no noise. In the kitchen, he poured himself a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and left the letter where she would find it. He didn't linger. He didn't glance back. He simply walked to the door, picked up his bag, and left the house he had once considered a sanctuary. The letter was short, precise, and honest. It explained everything without blame. It said he knew about the emotional connection she had with someone else, that he had observed her for clarity, and that he was leaving, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in pursuit of his own peace. It ended simply, "Goodbye." As he walked to his car, Evan felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he no longer had to live in uncertainty, sadness that the life he had imagined with Mara was over. But above all, he felt free. For the first time in a long while, he felt in control of his own life. Inside the house, Mara stirred and noticed the letter. She picked it up and began to read. Her eyes widened as the words sank in. She read about her lies, her hidden messages, her emotional distance. She read about Evan's observations, his quiet patience, and his final decision. And when she reached the last word, goodbye, she froze. She had expected confrontation, anger, perhaps even begging. But this was worse. This was final. There was no room for negotiation. No space for excuses. Evan had left, but not in anger. He had left in control. And that realization hit her harder than any argument ever could. For the rest of the day, Mara tried to reach him. She called, texted, and even tried visiting his office. But Evan remained unreachable. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he had learned that freedom sometimes requires distance. He had chosen to leave quietly, without drama, and in doing so, he had reclaimed his life. Evan spent that day calmly. He walked through his neighborhood, feeling the sun on his face, hearing the distant chatter of people going about their lives. Each step was a reminder that he was no longer bound by lies, suspicion, or betrayal. He was free to think, to breathe, to plan the next chapter of his life without fear or doubt. By evening, he had already begun imagining what life could be like. Simple joys, small adventures, quiet mornings, honest conversations, and a life where trust was mutual, not fragile. He didn't feel the need for revenge. He didn't want to humiliate Mara. His satisfaction came from knowing he had acted with dignity and that she would never forget the quiet finality of his departure. Inside the house, Mara finally sat down, exhausted, confused, and overwhelmed. She reread the letter, searching for some sign, some reason, some way to bring him back. But the truth was simple. He had left. He had left not because of anger, but because he had chosen himself. And in that choice, she saw the real power of his decision. That night, Evans stayed in a small hotel, letting himself rest without the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. He reflected on everything that had happened, the whispers, the small signs, the emotional distance, and he realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about exposing someone, shaming them, or causing them pain. Revenge was about reclaiming your life, your peace, and your dignity, and in that sense, he had already won. As he lay down to sleep, he thought of Mara one last time, not with hatred, not with anger, but with a sense of calm closure. He had loved her, he had hoped, he had waited, and now he had moved forward. The whisper of, "Don't touch me tonight," had been the first step, but his final whisper, though only in his actions, never spoken, was, "Goodbye." And that, he knew, was a power she could never take from him. Weeks had passed since Evan walked out of the house he had once called home. The memories of the quiet mornings, the whispered words, and the letter left behind were still fresh, but the weight of betrayal no longer pressed on his chest. In its place was a calm sense of freedom, a freedom he had not felt in years. Evan had settled into a small apartment nearby, a place of his own. It wasn't extravagant, but it was peaceful. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, and the windows let in sunlight that seemed to wash away the shadows of the past. He had no desire to fill it with reminders of the life he had lost. This space was for him, and for him alone. Each morning he woke without dread. He no longer checked messages, no longer wondered where Mara was or what she was doing. He had chosen clarity over suspicion, peace over confrontation, and that choice, he realized, was the ultimate power. Mara, on the other hand, had changed completely. She called him once, leaving a tentative voice message, apologizing, asking if they could meet and talk. She sent texts, each one carefully worded, hoping to reach him emotionally, hoping to stir the feelings she had ignored for so long. But Evan didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of principle. The time for discussion, for negotiation, for excuses had passed. Evan went about his days with quiet purpose. He started jogging in the mornings, enjoying the rhythm of his steps and the clarity of his thoughts. He visited local cafes, reading books and observing the world without judgment, letting the simple pleasure of life fill the spaces Mara had once occupied in his mind. He reconnected with friends he had ignored, taking small steps toward rebuilding a life rooted in honesty and trust. One afternoon, while sitting in a park, he noticed a couple laughing nearby. The man was telling a story, the woman hanging on every word. Evan smiled softly, not with longing, but with understanding. He realized that trust and love weren't about possession or control. They were about mutual respect and honesty, and he had been denied that in his marriage. But now he had the choice to seek it elsewhere, or to enjoy life on his own terms, free of fear and suspicion. Meanwhile, Mara struggled. She had not expected Evan's response, or lack thereof. She had imagined confrontation, tears, perhaps anger, but not this calm, composed indifference. The letter she had read over and over haunted her, not because it accused her, but because it ended. There was no negotiation, no pleading, no dramatic scene. Just finality. Goodbye. Her attempts to reach him slowly grew desperate. She left messages on his office phone, sent emails, even showed up at the apartment complex hoping to catch a glimpse of him. But Evan was never home, or when he was careful to avoid her. Not out of fear, but out of respect for the closure he had already achieved. One evening, Mara managed to speak to a mutual friend, someone she thought might give her information about Evan. The friend's response was simple: he's doing well. He's calm, focused, and happy. He's moved on. And he's not interested in revisiting the past. Those words hit her harder than any confrontation could have. She realized that the power she had once held, the power of secrecy, of betrayal, of hidden emotional connections, had been stripped away. Evan had reclaimed his life without a single harsh word, without humiliation, without drama. And that, she understood, was the ultimate revenge. Evan, meanwhile, continued living quietly, thoughtfully, with intention. He didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. He didn't expose Mara, didn't embarrass her, didn't try to make her feel guilty. Instead, he allowed her actions and choices to speak for themselves. Her regret, her confusion, and her growing realization of loss were consequences enough. He had discovered something profound. Revenge was not about causing pain to the other person. It was about reclaiming yourself. It was about refusing to let betrayal define your future. It was about walking away calm and composed and never looking back. Months passed. Evan had settled into a routine that brought him joy. He volunteered at a local community center, reconnected with old friends, and even took a short trip to the mountains, enjoying the quiet solitude of nature. Every experience, every small moment, reminded him that life could be full, even after heartbreak. Then, one day, Mara called again. This time her voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Evan, can we talk?" "Please. I made mistakes. I know that. I just want to explain." Evan listened to the voicemail once, then deleted it. He didn't feel anger or sadness. He felt the same calm certainty he had felt when he left that morning, weeks ago. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to negotiate. He had made his choice, and it was final. That evening he went for a walk, noticing the city lights reflecting on the river. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and for the first time in years, he felt completely free. He realized that true closure didn't require revenge. It didn't require anger or confrontation. It required peace with oneself, patience, and the strength to walk away when it mattered most. Evan thought back to the whisper, "Don't touch me tonight." And he smiled softly with understanding. That moment had been a turning point, the first crack in the illusion of a life that wasn't truly his. And his response, quiet, calm, dignified, had been his statement to the world. He valued himself more than a life built on lies. From that point on, Evan focused entirely on living intentionally. He pursued small joys, moments of happiness that were his alone. He reconnected with his creativity, taking up writing and sketching again. He discovered that freedom wasn't just leaving a relationship, it was embracing life fully, without fear, without hesitation, and without regret. Mara, despite her efforts, could not reach him. She had lost not just the marriage, but the control, the power, and ultimately, the chance to explain herself. The finality of Evan's goodbye was a lesson she could not undo, and in that, Evan found a quiet satisfaction that no argument or confrontation could ever provide. The story ended not with confrontation, not with vengeance, but with peaceful finality. Evan had chosen himself. He had reclaimed his dignity. He had left behind the whispers, the lies, and the betrayal, and in doing so had achieved the kind of revenge that mattered most: freedom, calm, and a life lived on his own terms. As the sun set over the city, Evan sat quietly on a bench, sipping tea, watching the world move around him. He felt the gentle rhythm of life, the quiet joy of independence, and the simple happiness of knowing he had acted with integrity. He thought of Mara, not with anger, not with longing, but with clarity. She had made her choices. He had made his, and in that choice, he had won. The final lesson was simple. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't drama or exposure. It's indifference. It's calm. It's walking away with your dignity intact, leaving the other person to face the consequences of their own actions. Evan had learned that, and in learning it he had finally found peace. And so, as night fell, he whispered softly to himself, a smile playing on his lips, "Goodbye."